Hey there, my name's Adam, and I want to thank you for taking a little while to watch this video. The goal of it is to give a critique of the interview on the Shawn Ryan podcast of Dr. Jeremiah Johnston, who shared with Shawn Ryan's audience some amazing artifacts and some storytelling of his own research and what some of the outcomes of that were. Before I go any further, I just want to qualify or sort of dequalify myself. That I am not a researcher and I am not stepping into this critique in the arena of academia. However, I am a lifelong Christian, and I am pursuing a master's degree in moral theology built upon 2 undergraduates in sacred art and in theology with a specific focus on the Catholic Church. I've worked for 10 years as a marketing manager and running the digital media for the Catholic Foreign Mission Society of America, and I'm also a Benedictine oblate. So I have a little bit of an understanding here. However, I do not in any way intend this video to be an academic peer review of in any way critique of Dr. Johnston's work. I appreciate his work. As I said, I find it enjoyable. However, we are in the arena of not misleading people and guiding people and steering people who may be on the fence with their faith or wanting to understand Christianity as a whole and have not yet had that experience yet, and may find this video very intriguing and therefore find what the credentials of Dr. Johnston bring forward as gospel truth. And in this critique, I would like to share with you that not only do I find much of the evidence that he brings forward to be distruthful, but I also find them pointed and, in fact, support a narrative that he's trying to present. And unfortunately, when we use guided, or I might even say misguided evidence to overshadow gospel truth, then we're swimming in some very dangerous waters. So let me get started with this critique. It's going to be a little bit long. I do want to say that I wasn't able to really get past. I really wasn't able to get past about an hour and a half, and I'm going to really focus on 2 areas, and that's going to be his discussion centered on the Shroud of Turin and some of the facts that he brings forward about it, not about the scientific facts about the shroud. I'm not even going to touch on that. And then I'm going to go into when he talks about the James bone box, or the ossuary. And there are some very, very interesting things here that I think that from my critique, you are going to want to research yourself. And that's really what I'm asking you to do. Don't take what I have to say as truth. In fact, I don't even feel qualified to write a sermon to my bathroom mirror. So, however, I am a person of strong faith, of Orthodox Catholic faith, strong conviction, and I believe it's our responsibility to call truth forward, especially in times like these. So I hope you'll join me in this discovery of our faith. So, as I said, I genuinely enjoy the work that Dr. Johnston brings in his research. I find his work both rigorous and fun. However, in this episode with Shawn Ryan, and as I've seen him do many times, he really sidesteps some major points. And I'm very certain that he's aware of this. His questioning of why the Catholic Church doesn't show the shroud, it ignores a deeply rooted and very, very widely theologically accepted reason. That's a simple Google search. I'm going to get into that a little bit shortly. But I do want to tee this up by saying that, no, the reason that it's not shared is theological. There's also safety and security reasons around that, of course. But fundamentally, it is theological. I want you to pay close attention here. I want you to pay close attention to his redirection, oftentimes in his speech. They are well placed, and they are meant to hook. And they're meant to cause like a sudden and sensational doubt among the viewers. An example is we see with Shawn asking, why would they do that when he's talking about the Catholic Church not showing the shroud? and keeping it hidden, and isn't it meant to evangelize? Like, and he, Shawn is almost like kind of like, well, like why? It's like, dude, like, do you really think for 1 second that that Shawn Ryan is the first person to ask this question? You don't think that there's an answer? And Johnston just sits there and goes, right? Why? Okay, so that's a classic hook. He's teeing this up as though the Vatican is somehow being mysteriously or even conspiratorially avoidant, and this is completely false. And thus it calls into question the objectivity of his entire presentation on the show, and I hope to explain why. There's a few points that I'm going to double down on, really, about the House of Savoy. I'm going to kind of go over those facts a few times because it does get a little bit complex. I can tell you that from my own lived experience when we're talking about the Shroud. My own lived experience, whether it be in the monasteries of a monastery in Univ, Ukraine, to the Church of Saint Sulpice in France, Basilica of Guadalupe in Mexico, the church absolutely does indeed display very, very highly detailed and absolutely spectacular displays of facsimiles of the Shroud for everyone to see. The original in Turin, this is reserved for what is called solemn ostensions. And notice how he doesn't mention this. Like he knows this, though. I'm sure he knows this. But why? Why doesn't he mention this? This is, the solemn ostension, it's reserved for preserving physical integrity. And instead, as I already mentioned, the church uses these life-size replicas all over the world. And they use them to globally preach. And again, here's another point that I'm going to kind of dig into. In the Catholic Church, oftentimes the Shroud is referred to as the fifth gospel. And I would cite St. John Paul II and Benedict XVI for this. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Benedict XVI and something here that's really important I think everyone should understand. But my point to kick this all off is that it's not just being hidden here. It's actually being stewarded. And this is a very, very important distinction to make and understand. So his statement at hour 1 minute 24, second 24 it begins, is that the Catholic Church has never come out and said they believe this is Jesus's burial cloth. Okay, so this is where my confidence in the integrity of this work begins to really kind of go downhill. This is the coffee spits on my keyboard moment, really. Johnston is absolutely certain. He is very aware of the nuance here. The church has never made an official definitive claim regarding the Shroud of Turin as the biological burial cloth of Christ, precisely because it must maintain a position of scientific neutrality. And by doing so, this stance, it allows the Shroud to be venerated as a spiritual icon while leaving the determination of its physical origin to the realm of science. This is literally the role of the church. And to support this, I want to reference Pope Benedict XVI. As I said, I was going to talk about him a little bit. But the first place I'm going to talk about him here is at the meditation of the Holy Father during the ostension of the Holy Shroud. This was given on May 2nd, 2010. And it's where he personally described the Shroud as an icon written in blood, quote, an icon written in blood, end quote. Noting that it corresponds perfectly with what the gospel tells us about the passion of Jesus, regardless of its scientific provenance. So as you can see, Johnston offers some divergence here from the truth, or at least is somewhat guilty of not telling the complete story in order to offer, some sensationalism. Or to sharpen an axe. I'm not sure, but I think as we go on, I'm going to clear this up a little bit for you. Next, as a freshman researcher at best, I'd want to know specifically why he was factually wrong about the Savoy stewardship of the Shroud. This is very important, the House of Savoy. You know, he mentions the Savoy family once in his passing. It's almost like sort of just sort of a minor detail. But he also references that the Pope is the one who takes possession of the shroud in 1983. And this, again, is factually wrong. And he knows this. He has to know this. Giving it to a man is not what Umberto II states in his will. And again, public domain, I'm going to double down on this. The shroud is legally committed to the stewardship of the Holy See, not the man. And he's granted the guardianship to the Archbishop of Turin. So his point about it being orphaned, during conclave, it's just complete nonsense. It's a fabrication. It doesn't speak to international law or canonical law. There's a lot of things around this. And again, he's super smart. He knows this stuff, which means he knows it, but he's purposely sort of changing the truth here, which means, okay, we can make mistakes. But this starts to smell like an axe grinding, or he's just wanting to sell books. I don't know, but I'm going to come to a conclusion here. The shroud is not orphaned, by the way, during conclave. It just doesn't work like this. Like the Sistine Chapel or the Codex Vaticanus, they're not orphaned. It's just not. That's not the way it works. Like, so why would he make this stuff up? He talks about, he tried to get an interview. Well, okay, well, why was your interview turned down? You don't mention that. I could go on and on, but it's really frustrating to try to look up to a researcher of his status and see this amount of bullshit that's being brought to the table. Especially to someone as earnest as Shawn Ryan. Okay, so there's some really theologically grounded reasons why the true shroud isn't publicly used as a tool for evangelization. He frames it as some kind of mystery, like I said, or like I said, it's like some kind of conspiracy by the Catholic Church. Like, really? Are you kidding me? It's so far from the truth that even I'm sure the House of Savoy would, they're probably laughing out loud watching this video, given their history of how the shroud has been venerated through them. Just go research it and you'll see. Speaking of history, go ahead and do your research on his statement about it only being viewed 30 times. Like, you'll just Google it. You'll find out. You'll just see how wrong this all is. But it doesn't speak to why, and that's what I'm most curious about here in this critique. He also states, and I'll quote, "The Catholic Church itself doesn't even consider it real," and kind of is like leaves one to say, like, what, really? It's like, dude, Pope Benedict himself, like I've already said, coined it as the fifth gospel. Like, why didn't he mention this? Again, it's all smoke and mirrors that he's playing for the theologically naive listener. And he damn well knows the reason why the Holy See, along with the patriarchs of the Orthodox churches, would absolutely not want this being out for public display. And speaking of the Orthodox, no, it was not under the protection of the Eastern Orthodox Church. Like he says, 125, that the Eastern Orthodox Church protected the shroud for the first 1,000 years in Constantinople. His claim that the Eastern Orthodox Church protected the shroud for the first 1,000 years is a complete historical anachronism. Like, any fifth grade Catholic school kid knows that the Great Schism didn't occur until 1054, and prior to that, it was the undivided church. So the statement about the Eastern Orthodox Church protecting it for the first 1,000 years, I mean, it's crap that you wouldn't even see on Reddit. Just to use this modern denominational label for the first millennium, it's just, I mean, it's absolutely misleading. Like, why would he say this? He knows better. And again, I could go on and on. Hey, look, if this stuff, if it fits your faith, if it fits your worldview or your concept of proper research, then, I mean, cool. But when it potentially steers those who are on the fence with their belief in the gospel of Jesus Christ, the full expression of our faith, into a direction that's going to be self-serving to his own cause and bias, like I said, we're now having a different conversation. It's a different outcome. And I'm not certain that it's on the side of the common good. Go see 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 7. History to serve his narrative, like changing up history to serve his narrative versus objective and researched, peer-reviewed, and verifiable facts. I don't know. And again, like I said, I'm really a nobody. And, while I'm working in working to understand theology, I do have a little understanding here. While I may not have the credentials, I am just a sinner with faith and a love for Christ and his church. And that's enough to stand up and call truth forward. So I'd like to also come back to his claim that the shroud did not come into the church's possession until 1983. It's a pedantic technicality that really just, again, it ignores history. So the House of Savoy, like, he just says it once. Okay, again, just quick research. They are staunch defenders of the faith for the Catholic Church. They have been an incredibly important part of the church's fabric in Europe, in Italy. They have been present since the 6th century, and they have held legal title to the shroud. They've kept it in the Cathedral of Turin for veneration of the faithful, with the full blessing of the papacy, from the full blessing of the Holy See. The transfer in the 1980s was a legal bequest following the death of Umberto II. It was not some sudden discovery like he frames it as. Like they just got it in 1983, and Shawn Ryan's like, "Are you kidding me? Like, no shit. Like, seriously? No, dude, that's not the story." Like, to suggest that the shroud was somewhere else, it completely ignores the fact that the popes have known exactly where it was and who held it in their trust for centuries. And they were defenders of the Catholic Church. At 125, second 25, he says, quote, "At the death of the Savoy family." It's like, bro, the House of Savoy, one of the oldest royal dynasties in the world, did not just up and die. They didn't just become extinct and then the Catholic Church took the shroud. That's not how this is. The bloodline did not end, as you suggest it did, as the family died. The family still exists today, and they're currently headed by Emone, the Duke of Aosta, if I hope I pronounced that right. There's no death of the Savoy family. While they no longer rule Italy, the monarchy was abolished in 46, the lineage and its relationship with the Catholic Church are very, very strong to this day. So at 1 hour 27, minute 27, he claims, this is where he claims that it didn't come, quote, "It didn't come into the hands of the Catholic Church until 1983. Like, again, he's like framing it as it's like some private family heirloom. It's just a staggering misrepresentation. There was a legal title transfer in 83 following the death of Umberto II, the House of Savoy. They held the shroud in sacred trust for the church for over 500 years. It was kept, like the chapel, like, first of all, like it wasn't in some family attic. It wasn't in the living room for people to look at during wine parties. He should have been more clear on this. It was actually housed in the Chapel of the Holy Shroud, which is a Baroque masterpiece built specifically for it by the Catholic Church. It's physically attached to the Turin Cathedral, built by the Catholic Church. The Archbishop of Turin has acted as the liturgical custodian for centuries. Just go ahead and Google what liturgical custodian means, the theological position that it is. To suggest the church was an outsider to the shroud's history until 40 years ago isn't just a lapse in history. It's an absolute calculated narrative to make the church look like a latecomer to the stewardship of its own most significant relic. Why is Johnston doing this? So let me break this down a little bit. We'll just kind of let's just put another layer on this and then move on, put a bow on it here. He's referring to the death of Umberto II when he's talking about the church gets it in 83. It's the last king of Italy. He dies in 1983. The fact that he fails to be clear here, it just matters so immensely, and it's so suspect. While the shroud did move into the hands of the Holy See in 83 upon the bequest and the will of the king, it did not come from the death of the family, as Johnston quote, as he says. I would just like you to kind of go out and understand, like, just research this on your own. Research this on your own. The shroud was not given to a man. It was not given to the Pope, as he says. And he says, quote, the Pope. He gave it to an office. Johnston should have clearly quoted Umberto II's will, and where he says that it is given to the office of the Pope. The shroud is officially owned by the Holy See. It is the Sancta Sedes, or the Apostolic See. It's not the Vatican. The Vatican is a city-state territory. It wasn't given to one man. It wasn't given to Pope John Paul II. It's like, why does this matter? It's because the Holy See is the sovereign entity representing the government of the Catholic Church. And it possesses this international legal personality. So what I mean by that is, like, if the Vatican State were to be dissolved tomorrow, okay, if something happens, the Holy See and its ownership of the shroud still remains legally intact. It did not go to the Vatican. Umberto II recorded this explicitly in his will, and the donation was to, quote, and like I said, Johnston should have said this, the Holy See in the person of the Supreme Pontiff, not the guy, Pope John Paul II. There is no doubt that Johnston knows this. There's no doubt in my mind. So why the misinformation to discredit the Catholic Church? I'm sorry. The shroud is not some personal trinket or some relic or something that the Pope has to show major donors. It's a legacy willed to the Holy See in trust for the faithful, and it falls under legal pontifical guardianship delegated to the Archbishop of Turin, making its restricted viewing of matter of institutional preservation and liturgical reverence. Those are the legal words, man. It's not a personal or political cover-up. Anything else, it's just objectively wrong what he's saying. In hour 1 minute 25, actually second 43, quote, the shroud was essentially orphaned at that point when he's speaking about conclave. Seriously? No, that's legally and canonically inaccurate. Jeremiah, he knows this. Like, Jeremiah, come on, man, you know this stuff. It's a narrative that is just, it's narrative fiction, right? It's narrative fiction. He's saying this for drama. He's saying this for effect. And as I already pointed out, legally and canonically, the shroud is owned by the Holy See, which possesses perpetual sovereign personality. It cannot be dissolved. The Vatican can, but the Holy See cannot. And during the period of conclave called sede vacante, the College of Cardinals are legally obligated to protect the Holy See's patrimony. And furthermore, like the Archbishop of Turin that we've already mentioned, he remains the pontifical guardian, regardless of who sits on the chair of Peter or in that time when nobody does. It's still under the pontifical guardianship of the Archbishop of Turin. So there's no orphanage. Like, to say that the shroud is orphaned at that time, it's just irresponsible. It's irresponsible. It's not homeless. It wasn't orphaned during any transition of power. It's not only a misunderstanding of canon law, it's a deliberate attempt to paint the Catholic Church's stewardship as unstable or as negligent. And why? Like, I really want to respect Dr. Johnston's work and even his commitment to his Christian faith and his ministry. But I got to ask, why is he bending the truth so much? Look, go research this yourself. Again, I'm a nobody. Can't even do a sermon to my own bathroom mirror. I don't have that. But I'm a person of faith here, and I'm going to call truth forward. One last thing, I want to ask this question, about his claims that the church didn't have it until '83. Like, right, Shawn? Like, how's it like? And Shawn's like, really? It didn't? Okay, well, answer me this. Who authorized the 1898 Secondo Pia photograph that you mentioned? Who paid for that? Who sponsored it? It was when the first negative was seen. Oh my God. Or how about the 1978 STIRP testing? You know what? I'm going to save you the time, and I'm going to answer both. They were done under the authority of the Catholic Church, specifically under the authority of the Archbishop of Turin, and acting with the king's permission under the House of Savoy, defenders of the Catholic faith. What he puts forward is completely false. He hides the truth. He does not tell the full story, and he knows that he's doing this. Is he framing it as some kind of conspiracy of silence? Is he framing it as they're doing something evil here? Like, what's the reason? I'm going to get into that here in a second. I'd like to address the question of why don't we just show it? Like, what's the reason? Why not just bring it out and show it? Well, because there are two reasons that the church doesn't want to publicly display that actual shroud. And I touched on this a little bit a few minutes ago, but it's not just that it isn't just a relic to be hung on the wall or like a museum piece. But for the church, it's something much greater. It's even beyond veneration. You have to understand that we're talking about, as we've said, the fifth gospel. We're talking about the actual blood and matter of God, the blood and matter of Christ. Its enormity makes it the most prized target on earth in history. It's immeasurably vulnerable, not just physically. And Shawn Ryan, he leans into this a little bit, but diabolically. Now, those with even a little bit of theological understanding, if you have a little bit of training, maybe you've even seen a few podcasts, you're going to understand what that access can bring about, what it can trigger, the theological madness that it could bring forward. It risks distracting the faithful from the mystical body and forcing a hyper-focus on the reliquary body. It's a very slippery slope, a very, very slippery slope that risks sliding the faithful into the icon worship that critics have accused Catholics and Orthodox of all the ways back to the iconoclasts. It's not icon worship, but we could go there. Johnston surely understands this high theology, and I'm really very much skimming the surface here. Is he not bringing this forward and creating a dead stop? Like, yeah, Shawn, why? Why aren't they doing it? He knows why. He understands why. But is it for the sake of charismatic sensationalism? Is that why he chooses to ignore this? It's extremely dangerous territory. And furthermore, I fundamentally disagree with his foundational thesis regarding Christian doctrine. He leans heavily on this prove it first model that reduces faith to like these to sticks and stones, to evidence, right? Anthropologic data and archaeological discovery, then build faith upon this. This is a perspective that starkly contradicts like the intellectual tradition of the church fathers and the scholastics. The scholastics being the philosophic thinkers such as St. Augustine or St. Anselm of Canterbury or Thomas Aquinas, who all integrated the logical rigor of Plato and Aristotle into the formation of Christian doctrine. Extremely important. And they use reason to illuminate rather than to dissolve the faith into inherent mystery. And I don't want to dismiss that mystery that we see our Orthodox or Eastern Orthodox brothers and sisters really hold so strongly and dear, because it's such a priority. But however, the scholastics brought forward a way to frame our understanding of the faith based on philosophy. And I'll go into St. Anselm's principle, which was extremely important to me, very influential, and that is the fideus quaerens intellectum. And this is like faith-seeking understanding. It's the core of the Christian experience of faith. It's like I use a lot When people ask me like, hey, why are you Catholic? Why are you Christian? Like, what's your reason behind that? And I say, like, it's simple. Ask, finish the sentence. Ask and you will. Okay. It's John 16:24, I think. Well, Johnston's thesis sort of flips this, suggesting that we must receive proof that leads us to ask. He talks about the evidential theory that, this is really highly problematic, and it dismisses the entire sacrifice of faith that one is called to endure. To prioritize archaeological fact over divine reason, it's to regress back to a pre-Paschal discipleship. He admits in his own presentation this approach invites us to mirror the uncertainty of the apostles. I don't know about that. And the doubt of Thomas, to mirror that doubt instead of imitating to the best of our ability the transformative reality of the risen Lord. Think about that for a second. Regardless of what you think of him, Pope Benedict the 16th, Joseph Ratzinger, he was an intensely brilliant theologian. And I think we can all heed his sentiment regarding the historical critical method that we're talking about here, Dr. Johnston versus St. Anselm of Canterbury, and their opposing thesis. Pope Benedict argued that if we only look at the archaeological or historical facts of Jesus, we see a man of the past, not a Lord of the present. Mic drop. But Dr. Johnston knows this. So I'm gonna again, I really want to double layer here on this point, and I'll go beyond the scholastics. I'll go beyond St. Anselm of Canterbury. I'll go beyond this reasoning of faith leads to understanding versus understanding first must lead to one's faith. And I'd like to crack open a personal favorite, and that's of Thomas à Kempis, who so eloquently suggests in the second most read book, The Imitation of Christ, he really suggests that our path isn't to demand that Christ take our hand and put it into his wound before we believe, be it that with data, with artifacts, with relics, or conspiracy, but rather that we're called to ask through prayer Jesus taught through his apostles and the sacrifice he offered to both you and I. And I say this with my choke swelling up with tears as I can see that I have to kind of wrap this up and get to my Easter vigil as we are approaching the Easter holiday. And tonight is the most important day of my year, my spiritual year. Archaeology, it's a cool tool, no doubt, but it is a servant of faith, not faith's master. And Johnston's work is legit. I think it is. I enjoy it, and I want to respect him. But in this instance, he's offering a slightly forked-tongued mischaracterization about stuff, and I know he's aware of it. And that just, again, it leads me to ask why. Science offers no proof in the pudding or shortcut toward belief. These are destinations that are reached only through the journey within the mystery of faith. And consequently, and this is important, it's the revelation. It's the revelation, capital R, that provides us the ultimate definition of what we find both buried in and made from the earth. And lastly, Johnston seems to have that axe to grind, like I've mentioned 3 times already. So let me call that forward. I stopped, like I said, at, after talking about the Shroud, but this morning on my way to get coffee, I hit the play button again, and I went about another 8 minutes to where he starts talking about James's bone box. And as his narrative progresses, he really leans into some 99% truths, and this is dangerous. When he says that, quote, we actually have James's bone box. We actually have James's bone box. No, we don't. We do not. That story is murky at best. Okay, it's not even a 90% truth. It's not even an 80% truth. It's not even a 50% truth. It fails to support a spiritually dangerous foundation that he tries to build upon. And forgive me again for being so long here. but this really matters, and I'm going to share why. The James Ossuary was not found in a controlled archaeological excavation. It's a fact that Johnston knows. He's got to know this. And its chain of custody is literally non-existent. Okay, so those two facts right there he didn't bring up, that there was no controlled archaeological dig or discovery that it comes from, and that they don't know its chain of custody. They don't know its origin. Its chain of custody is literally non-existent. So why twist a truth that's so well documented? The artifact is owned actually by a private collector named Oded Golan, not we. And look, this detail is crucial because Golan spent 22 years in litigation with the Israeli government and was even incarcerated twice for the illegal sale of artifacts. And while he was eventually acquitted, he was acquitted of forgery. The presiding judge said something really interesting. He explicitly stated during the acquittal, quote, "That does not mean that the inscription is true and authentic." And the Israeli Antiquities Authority actually retains many of this guy's artifacts precisely because of these concerns. This is all public record. It's a simple Google search. Golan allegedly found the box in some market in the 70s. Like many legitimate artifacts of that era, they were victims of looting and tampering for profit. And why would such an acclaimed researcher as Dr. Johnston not share that point and omit such a massive asterisk when building a thesis with Shawn Ryan in front of potentially millions of people? Why would this be left out of this? So, my assumption is that the omission exists to support a specific follow-up claim. To define the inscription, Johnston uses this classic forked tongue approach. It's this false analogy trick that every salesperson knows. If you and I are brothers, Shawn, okay, so he's creating this connection. Quote, he says, "If you and I are brothers, Shawn, and I died, you would put me in a tomb." Okay, so if the listener takes the bait here and doesn't question the framing, the narrative then seems qualified. And why would Shawn Ryan know any different? He's not a theologian. He's not a Greek linguist. Johnston completely ignores the actual Greek word used in the Gospels and on the box, adelphoi. Adelphoi, it has a broad semantic range. I am not a Greek linguist, but I did do my little bit of research here. And I've known this one, though. It includes cousins, step-siblings, tribal kin, dear friends, followers. And this is extremely, extremely important. By Johnston's claim, this definitively means that they are biological siblings from the same mother, and he's making a subjective theological choice. Pay attention here. His claim and what he says of them being biological siblings of the same mother, he's making a subjective theological choice and not stating an objective linguistic fact. He's skipping over 2,000 years of academia, of scholarship, and to do what? To nest his own spiritual bias? I don't know. Furthermore, Johnston claims that, quote, "no other bone box would say who your brother was," end quote. Dude, this is absolutely false. While rare ossuaries belonging to families of wealth or significance have been found with inscriptions of their brothers or of people of prominence, you can't just go say these things because you think people are going to believe what you're saying. You're not going to get away with that. And I'll give you some examples. Alexander, son of Simon, most likely Simon of Cyrene, or Miriam, daughter of Yeshua, son of Caiaphas. So why is he saying this stuff? It's just not true. Well, in my uneducated and humble view, Johnston is not interpreting the inspired word of God. He's actually embellishing it. And I know that's a heavy claim, but he's embellishing the word of God, and that's not good. When he claims that, quote, "James has always been jealous of his older brother Jesus," end quote. This is where I got off the train. He introduces a psychological narrative that simply doesn't exist in Scripture or in any reliable early historical source. The New Testament never attributes jealousy to James, nor does it explicitly describe Jesus as his older brother. And I know that this is kind of a common thing to say in some traditions. At most, the Gospels indicate that Jesus's brothers did not believe in him during part of his ministry, and that's about it. I mean, see John chapter 7, verse 5. Unbelief is not jealousy. Skepticism does not justify the construction of some lifelong rivalry, as Johnston suggests here, and to position his narrative. It's like modern storytelling imposed on sacred text to support a narrative that the text itself does not justify. It's modern fiction like that he's making up here, popularized by certain downstream traditions that just don't align with historical Orthodox Christian teaching of James. He's the brother of the Lord, Galatians 1, verse 19. Rather than presenting scientific fact, we're starting to see a real goal kind of come forward here, presenting 99% truths to galvanize some position that deconstructs the Theotokos and the perfection of Mary, the mother of God. Calling Jesus the older brother is a rhetorical snap intended to imply that Mary had other children after Jesus. So it's a common thing. It's a common thing when you're trying to discredit orthodoxy or the ancient Christian church, the Catholic Church more specifically. It's a direct challenge to the perpetual virginity of Mary and her title as God-bearer. And that's a cornerstone of 2,000 years of theology that protects the logic of the incarnation itself. And look, I'm not trying to bring that argument, that theological debate that we can have into this conversation. That's certainly a whole separate fork. My point here is in the Shawn Ryan podcast, the respect and the weight that Dr. Johnston carries and uses that academic weight and respect that he has to get a very large audience of non-faithful. Like, he's not in some theological forum or anything like that. He's not at a conclave. He's in one of the largest podcasts, speaking to an enormous audience, and on the tail of some of the best Catholic thinkers, Father Ripperger, for example. And he comes in and he uses this 99% truth to steer people away and to get people to think that there's a conspiracy or there's a reason that we just don't know. And that is factually wrong. It's dishonest. And Shawn Ryan should really understand this. And whether you're a Protestant, whether you're Catholic or Orthodox, this matters. It matters especially in this time. Anyone who zooms into the crumbs of Dr. Johnston's words in this interview, they are going to discover massive inaccuracies. Why? He knows this. And look, I'm going to leave you with this. We have to remember this. The devil himself is a master theologian. He alone preached scripture to Christ himself. Matthew chapter 4, verses 1 through 11. He is a genius. He will, and he did, misapply the truth. Friends, we're dealing in the realm of saving each other, of saving ourselves, and of saving souls. We are not in the realm of selling books or courses or programs. This is a much deeper conversation that even I don't even feel qualified. I feel like I'm skimming the surface. And in fact, I'm even a little bit intimidated here because I know I'm in way over my head. But as I said, as someone of Christian faith, it is my responsibility to call truth forward. So I leave you with this. We have to ask why. But before we ask that, please make sure you ask.